There we go. So, yeah, we will be down a couple of players tonight. I guess Glenn has some stomach issues, and Brian is doing Brian things, which isn't, you know, that's not unexpected. Brian is in and out. He's a drop in and out player, so which I kind of understood at the start. So it will be just two of you, but I have at this stage. Um, it's funny because this particular leg, um, the the near end or the near side of yonder, kind of opens up a whole bunch of stuff for the referee, and I kind of knew. I kind of knew that this was coming because all throughout the box set they're alluding to this, and I'm like, when I first read through the box set, I was like, God, this whole campaign looks like a lot of work because, um, I mean, there, yes, there are of course scripted events, or what I call scripted events, but there are also huge gaps that have to be
I,
filled in.
I
Uh-huh.
think they took the wrong route with the whole thing. I mean, I haven't really done any research on anything on this adventure. I just kind of, jumped in and started playing. So, I mean, all I know about this is what we've learned up until here.
Right,
So,
right.
so my opinion is based on that. But I would have much rather them, rather than let's race to the far, far edges of anything imaginable and deal with an unknown spore threat.
Well, see,
I would have rather them just told us that, man, we know there's some shit out there, and we want you guys to
and
head
have
out
you
there.
accidentally find it? Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and
yeah,
and then we would have been on a mission that is more set up to make this leg of the adventure actually matter. I mean, if we're really thinking about things, uh, there's not a lot of incentive to take our time and spend
well,
3 or 4 months in
yeah.
this system
Well,
fucking around and
this particular leg of the adventure, there is that impetus to take your time, and the reason is because this is the really the and I've kind of said this a couple of times previously that this is the last opportunity. Really, this sector is the last opportunity that the ship has to find a crossing across the Great Rift, and so there is that impetus to let's take our time, research everything, because really the exploration aspect is almost, I mean, it is a secondary, but it really is almost equal to stopping the Deep Night entity. But um, it's a pretty close second. I mean, it's right in there, but it's really important in this section because um, you don't know, nobody knows how to accurately cross the Great Rift, and if there are races that are out and available to talk to, then you're going to want to make contact with them because if they've been living here for a lot longer than you guys have shown up, and
Right.
they may have information on exactly how to do that, which that not to metagame, but that can lead into all sorts of other conundrums. But I I'm going to be honest, in my assessment of Deep Night Revelation. Originally when this box set came out, they were saying that this may be the greatest um, traveler adventure ever made, and this, it's this grand exploration tour and blah blah blah, and that could possibly be true if, from the referee standpoint, you're willing to put in a lot of work. I mean, a lot of work, and that's great, but
How are the resources for GMs? Because I know like Pirates has a really active community, and you can find tons of community.
nil.
resources.
nil. Like there's none.
That's kind of what I thought. It didn't seem to be one of the bigger. It's one that people talk about a lot, but you never hear of anybody playing.
Well, and
running.
all I keep hearing from people that hey, if you're watching this show, thank you, and I hope anything that we do can give you insight. But from what I hear from a lot of people is that I think we're the only ones doing Deep Night Revelation. There
Well,
were a couple that started out and then I haven't heard
yeah.
anything from them.
I mean, I've definitely heard of people talking about how they've wanted to play it or that they've wanted to run it, but I've never heard of anybody, on the forums or threads talking about having played through it. I don't know. It is a weird thing because it feels like we've had a time pressure to not linger, and you're kind of like there's a lot of work being done and presenting all this material, and yet it feels like they don't want us to spend time here,
Right.
which is a really weird situation. This is not Star Trek go forth and explore. This is you've got 10 years to get to the other side of the universe, and then 10 years to get back, and so
and even the referee's guide and the campaign guide, which come in the box set, kind of have that issue. It talks about like you said, it's 10 or more, 10 plus years to get there, 10 plus years to get back. And I kind of rounded that and said, you're looking at 20 to 24 years round trip.
Right.
It could be 24 plus years round trip.
Sure.
But it goes into talking about, for instance, one of the assumptions is that the player characters end up being the captain and crew, or captain and bridge crew of the ship. And reading through that, knowing what I know about, real life, not Star Trek the original series, but real life naval practices, it would be a very boring campaign because you guys would never leave the ship. You would actually, in order to, and maybe I should have done this, considering that the number of players that we have now, it would require you to have 2 or 3 characters in order for you to actually see any real action.
And there are plenty of games that work that way. I mean,
right. And I run an old school Essentials game where we do exactly that. Wes knows, he plays.
Yeah.
I mean, we have multiple characters.
Band of Blades works that way. I mean,
right.
There's a few of those.
And I mean, so if I were in the future to ever do this again, that's probably the route that I would take. But the route that I chose, I like the route that I chose.
I'm having fun.
But the books talk about, there's, so you have this amount of time to get there and back. I mean, it's not like it's a set amount of time, but the estimated time to get there and back. And then it talks about, how fast are they moving? Are they moving at flank speed? Are they moving at, just cruise speed? How far are they jumping? How often are they jumping? How quickly are they going to refuel? Well, you guys have been moving pretty quickly, usually doing like a 3-day refueling process, which is really putting your flight crews under the gun. They're really working overtime to get that fuel in. This leg of the journey, when you read this book, they go through and they're talking about how now, you guys need to slow down and look around you more, which now the flight crews don't necessarily have to be under the 3-day mark to refuel the ship. Now they could take, a week and a half and do things right. People have a little bit more relaxation. because the mission now it's changed to the science and mission crews who are going to be spending all of the overtime looking through telescopes and looking through data.
Right on.
So,
If yeah,
yeah, it's a very
if I would
very
have,
complex.
yeah, if I was gonna run this, I would have switched out our total beginning. We would be working for a really wealthy, extremely, I'm talking about Richie Rich level wealthy guy that would have been competing with an alternate guy on a bet on who can find a crossing of the Great Rift
Right.
first. And
Well,
then he would have outfitted this ship pretty much the same fucking way, but the bit would be, I just want you to go cross the rift. Well, and as you're getting into crossing the rift, then I would drop fucking the fungus among us on them,
right.
and it would be, do you want to risk total annihilation of all known life, or do you want to continue to cross the rift and go try to cut this thing off at this? So I'm just saying that would be me, and so we would, all the way up until here, instead of a hunting for this mold and going after it, we would be exploring, trying to find the way across the rift, and we would, there could be financial bonuses,
Right.
and then there could even be a cut in the deal where they say, well, we'll supply the anti-aging drugs so you don't even lose that thing in your life. Fuck it, you're going out there, who's to care what the laws are? Take what you want.
Well, I mean,
But
one of the things I think I would probably have done something like, one of your jobs is that you need to set up embassies
Right.
yeah,
along the way, so that you're having to actually negotiate with people and get permission to have a couple of your volunteers who've agreed to stay as missionaries or diplomats on these foreign planets and learn the ways and stuff like that.
so like instead of just crossing, it would be establish a trade route across the Great Rift.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that requires you to have embassies and trade
Well,
deals
it should be.
and
So it should. Yeah. So you bring up a very good point. So there's a there are a couple of things about the beginning, and I mean now I sound like I'm nitpicking the box set, and I am a bit. So the beginning of the way this whole thing starts out, it starts out typical traveler. Because the player characters are created, they are average, ordinary people that are thrown into extraordinary situations. Gotcha. I understand that. But there are a number of assumptions. So the first one being, so for instance, you've made it all the way out here to the near side of yonder. Okay, great. But evidently, you're on the wrong side of the rift, and you need to find some way to cross. And my question about that is, why did they choose here for you to cross? There were much better places for you to cross far earlier. You could have crossed in the islands. You could have crossed. There's
but
an
you'd be going through,
Aslan section that you could have crossed.
you'd be going through a lot of hostile space in both those areas. I think they're looking for something that's not Aslan.
Right. And then, and along with that, so they make they at the very beginning they tell you that the real cruise starts from Tobiah to Denman, and so you're leaving Tobiah. You cannot go along the edge of the Great Rift from Tobiah to Denman, and the reason you can't do that is because Deep Night Revelation, before it was recommissioned, is a fucking warship. And there is no way that the Aslan Herate is going to tolerate an Imperial warship to the tune of 75,000 tons just traipsing through their space, and saying, oh, well,
Yeah, no big deal.
Yeah, no big deal. We're not here to hurt anybody. We're a research mission. They're not going to believe that.
Purely scientific.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
Our big
spinal mount.
particle beam spinal mount is only for scientific purposes. You have nothing to fear from us.
That spinal mount's a radar.
Yeah. So So they totally leave out the fact that you're going to have to skirt, and basically you're going to have to travel through the Trojan Reach, which is going to have some overlap and play with any Pirates of Drynex campaign that's going on. And there's potential shenanigans there, which you guys picked up, like I said, David Anderreich, the Space Wizard, and a couple of other people in so doing. But then you come around there, and there's this void of information in the box set before you get to Demnon, and there's a whole bunch of crap there. I had to buy the additional book, the Spinward Extents, which it is a really cool book and actually told me a whole bunch of stuff about both campaigns that I was unaware of, that's awesome. Love that book. But then there's stuff even rimward of that that has been left out. There is some wiki articles that you can look up, and you really have to be careful looking at the wiki articles, because there is a mix of information from all editions of Traveller, and some of it's not canon. And some of it, when I say not canon, I mean it wasn't an official book, but now it's not official. That's what I mean by that. But then there's some of it that is just out in the wind completely, that I don't know where it came from. One example is I think Mavzog sector and the Mavzog themselves. The only information that I can find on them is from the wiki, and I've got classic Traveller box sets. I've got a bunch of stuff. I've not been able to find anything on them, but they are freaking nasty. They are, from everything that I can find about them, they are basically, they have a lot of teeth, and they are they are very imperialistic, and they are spacefaring, and they are intelligent. For the most part, but basically their whole attitude is submit or we eat you kind of situation, and they have an entire empire out there, and you guys narrowly missed it by, like, I don't know, 5 parsecs from the route that you chose. And I was sitting there looking, I'm like, God, please don't choose to go don't explore too much here, because and I was kind of, let's just skirt past that. Let's ignore that, because I don't want to get into it, because I don't know what is and isn't, I don't know, official lore, because it's just, I don't know. And then you have stuff from T5, which is all sorts of wonky. I mean, there's all sorts of new stuff coming from T5 that is questionable, in my opinion. I know it came from Mark Miller, but holy shit. Wow, some of it's out there. So the box set leaves a lot of gaps, and even the expansion books. There's 6 expansion books, and they are.
I can't
There's
believe
gaps.
they didn't give you a fucking a ship's roster.
They did. They do provide a somewhat. I mean,
What
kind of.
NPCs? Is that what they gave you?
There
Here
are.
some key NPCs you need to have in
Right,
things.
yeah, there's 20 members of this crew.
Yeah,
20
there
that kind of thing.
there is a short list of names and what their basic function is. But so they break it down, in I don't particularly care for the way they did this either. But so there is all these different subsets that you could be tracking. And that I have decided that, for the sake of story, is just, you think tracking encumbrance is bad? Wow. Yeah, that has nothing on this. So they've got things like divisional ability, and you've seen me make a couple of those rolls. And that can go up and down versus what the morale of the crew is, and what their exhaustion level is, things like that.
Okay.
That can that can go raise and lower, and so I can determine what some of those are. But there's a whole slew of sub parameters that similar to like what we were talking about with the World Builders Handbook. That's a whole other can of worms. That really, I mean, how much do you want to get into it? I mean, for most of the games that I play, I very very rarely run into the players or the group rather that wants to get into the minute absolute details down to the individual of what the crew is doing. I think the only real time that I ran into that was running an old Mech Warrior campaign, first edition, where I had one player out of 6 that wanted to get into the minutia of running a mercenary company. I'm like, okay, well, you better get the fucking spreadsheets out because, I mean, literally, you're talking about an accounting job. I mean,
Yeah.
like tax form level crap in order to figure out, all of this stuff. And I'm like, I don't. The rest of the party doesn't want to do that. I don't want to do that. So,
Right.
And that's kind of the level that we get to here. That's kind of the level that World Builders Handbook gets into. I can definitely see that there's a pattern. There's somebody over there at Mongoose that's that kind of player, and that's great. That if you want to be that detailed, if you want to do vector, mathematics for your space combat, hey man, if you want one round of combat to take 2.5 hours, have at it. But
Well, but I mean, in my mind, what it'll do is it'll force, tabletop simulators like Foundry and stuff to get more sophisticated, so that that kind of thing could
that would be cool.
be handled.
Yeah.
See, and that's what that's why I don't mind it. It's like I'm not gonna do it, but I'm happy the rules exist, and maybe it will lead to something cool happening in the future.
We have the ability to do 3D mapping in exploratory space. If you played the game Freelancer?
Yes.
I mean, that was
Freelancer. That's an old one.
Well, I'm just saying. I mean, as you moved around, there would be different factions, different ships, and lots of shit going on, and it was in true 3D. I mean, you had to manipulate. But I mean, I don't see why we couldn't have star maps and shit that weren't 3D. I mean, if they're going to base it on a traveler map on a website, why not make it 3D? And then why not give us 3D platforms where we can move our ships around in 3D and measure distances and
why not put the vector directly into the software? Right.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't understand why that can't be done. I mean, I would think that because that's the Achilles heels of playing Traveler, is that we're trying to play a 3D game on 2D paper.
Right, and that's always been the problem. Right.
Yeah, and I mean it's like, okay, but now the technology and the programming exists to easily make that. I mean, are they just lazy about mapping it out?
You have to figure that you're talking about. We are in the early stages of seeing tabletop games going over to the virtual tabletop, and I mean, even though we've been playing virtual tabletop for going on 10-15 years now, and I can't imagine what Roll20 looked like about 15 years ago. God. But anyways, we are in the early stages of that.
I mean, the earliest was just in the forums, just play by post. It was one of the reasons that the Amber diceless game got really popular, is that you didn't need to roll dice.
Right.
And so back then, forum games, it was the perfect forum game because you didn't have to worry about random numbers. And so, but it has really progressed a lot. And I mean, Foundry is doing more and more cool stuff. And I know lately, a bunch of my buddies from high school all have picked up Oculuses and my friend John sent me one so that we could all play Demio together. And so I don't know if you've seen that, but that is a really cool. It's just a battle. It's just kind of like any of the other kind of like Baldur's Gate is a turn-based combat system.
Right.
If you this is completely remove all role playing from every aspect of it. It's basically just a tactical game where you're fighting through 3 levels of a dungeon, and then there's different dungeons to choose from that have different enemies and different mechanics behind them. And it's just a really cool immersive 3D environment that you can expand and zoom in. You can be in the board, you can pick up the figures and take a look at them. It's really kind of cool the way it plays.
Nice. Give me
I,
1 second. I'll be
yeah.
right back.
Sure. I actually need to go at FK too.
Okay.
I'm gonna hit the restroom.
Okay, sorry about that.
No problem.
So Pirates of Drenax was actually my first Traveler campaign. Not our game, but Pirates of Drenax overall was my first Traveler game, and I fell in love with it. I mean,
Yeah.
there was just so much potential there, and there was just so much. I mean, and I had the first edition of Pirates of Drenax, and it just blew me away. Like there was so much wealth of data there. There was so much background. It was very rich. There was enough. There was enough background information that even if I wanted to come up with extra stuff, there was a wealth of background for me to grab from and run with.
Right. I don't understand why we're not putting more effort into getting. I mean, we just now started to actually get into trying to rebuild the starport. It just seems like, God, I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer to get that going again.
Well, in Pirates of Drenax, I mean, you're talking about a lot of money. So the money that you guys have invested and the money that you have saved up to rebuild a starport, nothing. That's nothing. I mean, think about the cost to let's say that Little Rock does Little Rock have their own airport?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's say that Little Rock decided that they were going to rebuild their airport almost completely from the ground up.
Right.
You're talking about numbers in the billions.
Sure.
And so, I mean, the fact that you guys, even if you in Pirates of Drenax, if you've got, if you are successful, really successful pirates, and you have done well, and you have a small fleet, and you have a kitty built up of 10 to 13 million credits, that's good for you. That is that is absolutely nothing to invest in the rebuilding of a starport. That congrats, you got your name to hang over the front door, and that's it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we could.
They named a wing of the food court after.
Right, they named a wing of the food court after you. Right, because I mean, you're talking about billions. I think Portland International Airport, they just did a renovation, and it was something to the tune of like, $235 million, and that was a remodel. That wasn't even a rebuild or a full adding a wing or anything like that. That was just a remodel of the concourse.
If you get a material source and you have an automated production, so the cost has got to come down. I mean, I understand we're talking big things, but I mean, a private airport that can handle international flights. I mean, there are lots of private individuals that can
Well,
pull
in the
that
case of
off.
like Drinax, you're not talking about a private airport. You're talking about a Class A starport.
Yeah,
So, I mean, you know, um,
it's got some bare bones in place. So
But I
I
mean,
mean, that's
yeah, there's
with
some
with
work that
Drinax, you're better off just converting an asteroid into a base.
right. Yeah,
I mean, it's so
almost.
much cheaper. So
Right.
well.
much cheaper.
What we did was, what we're starting to do is we got a series of engineering bots, a package of engineering bots and drones that could be run by the
So they're talking about
uh,
the if you look at the Drinax map or the floating palace map, the southernmost starport is, if you read through it, was actually destroyed like what, a couple hundred years ago when the Aslan actually bombarded the planet. It was actually,
uh,
it took a
Yeah.
hit.
Didn't they turn like the throne room was converted into
Yeah,
the
they converted the royal docks into their regular starport, and so these guys have gone so far as to say, well, we'll invest in rebuilding the original starport. So there is infrastructure there that can be salvaged, some of it, because you got to figure that the inhabitants of the floating palace have already gone through and picked the place clean, for stuff to sell so that they can buy food. But
right.
but the bots can do something with the girders and beams that are left over, and then the cost is going to be in getting material shipped and in order to build up from there. And so I mean, you guys have set the ball rolling, and of course the Kingdom of Drinax, now that you've set the wheels in motion, they have the reason to continue, and of course the Oleb in our campaign. Oleb is in a coma, so Prince Herrick has a reason to follow through that with that, and he can see the logic in it. He's got a lot of irons in the fire right now, though.
yeah, we had to do that on ourselves because they weren't doing shit. We'd just come give them millions of credits, and then there would be like, okay, that's just fucking gone.
Well, those
And
millions of credits that you're giving them are spent almost immediately because
yeah,
they have the population to feed, they have maintenance to do just to keep the floating palace floating. I mean,
Yeah.
that money that you're giving him, that 10% off the top, it gets spent like almost immediately. So, yeah, I mean, Drinax doesn't have any credit, and the credit they do have is probably bad.
Right.
They are a failing country.
Yeah.
They are
Well,
Somalia.
hopefully we can turn it around.
And every single planet nearby them is basically ecologically fucked, and it's Drinax's fault.
Well,
they're
partially Drinax's fault. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
And so you're trying to convert all these people into, hey guys,
Yeah.
we're
Well,
not
I mean,
so bad anymore.
what
right.
I want to do is I want to get the Class A starport up and running and manufacture system defense boats and sell them around. We have a command vessel that we can, in theory, I mean, it turns J1 when we put a couple of system defense boats on either wing, but we can take them through
Yeah,
some jump.
they have a
Yeah.
Rorix command ship.
Yeah.
So
Oh wow.
I mean, it's a really good plan, and but it is a really long term plan.
Right.
I mean, I don't know. Looking at it in terms of the length that is left in the campaign, I don't know that you guys will actually see the end of it. I mean,
My plan for our game is I'm trying to set up offices on all the various planets, and then get trade ships to run on small loops that run, small loops in those different from office to office, just doing trade. And basically that way I can have an information network that's fairly large, and I can have the information being passed in those merchant loops so that it gets back to me as quickly as possible, because that's the big problem with Traveler, is that information travels just as fast as people do.
right. Yeah, it's
So,
age of sail for com traffic.
yeah. Yeah, and so that's the whole thing. Is it the better the information network you can create, the better you're going to be. And so that's my whole plan, is to
Well,
try to get a good web of constant stream of information.
so no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, just that could be just ship traffic. It can be trade, what's being traded, what's the ships that are going through, that type of thing.
But see, like all three of us have just given a perfect example of how fantastic. I mean, Pirates of Drenax is, in my opinion, there are a couple of campaigns and I honestly two. There are two campaigns that stick out in my mind over the past 46 years that are the two best campaigns that I've ever played in or run. And the first one, if you've ever had any chance to play it, is Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay's first edition's version of the Enemy Within campaign. Absolutely the best campaign I have ever seen laid out in my life. Like it is highly detailed. It gives enough information and background that the game master can go off the rails and go any direction he wants. The other one is, of course, Pirates of Drenax.
Here's the character I played through that campaign.
Nice. So you know exactly what I'm talking about. So then you have this one, and Deep Night Revelation tries to live up to that. And I suppose if you if you have a lot of time as a referee, or you could make it so, but it's going to be a lot of work.
I don't know that I like the starting ship that they give you in Drenax. It's
the Harrier. Yeah,
because the whole thing is that if you're going to be pirates, the Harrier is a shitty ship.
Well, the assumption is with the Harrier that you're only going to be harassing smaller class vessels. I mean,
but the thing is,
there's no money in that.
The thing is that your gun irradiates the living shit out of everything. It's a massive gun,
right?
And it doesn't have anything for close combat. So in terms of like where it's greatest is sitting at very distant and just blowing ships up.
Well, and I think the idea
of like actually boarding and seizing ships, it's not the best ship for that.
Well, and I think they did make some modifications to it, like they added a breaching tube, and I think the biggest thing about the Harrier is that because of the stealth hole, is that once you make your presence known, you're probably going to be firing like a warning shot with that big gun, and then the idea of that is that they're going to give up.
You could just murder people because from very distant, your gun is just as effective.
Yeah, it's got very long range,
and they have to scan for you every single round due to your stealth.
Right,
and then
they're at -4 because of your stealth.
And with your military countermeasures, you can be blocking down their communications. Right. I mean, it's just it's really designed to be an assassin ship. Right. It's great for hiding in a system and just absolutely killing something from a distance.
I agree.
But if you're trying to like actually attack a ship and board it and take their cargo, not the greatest ship for that.
Yeah, if there's any cargo left.
We oftentimes we're just sitting there going, come on, guys, really, we just want you to surrender. This is a lot of radiation.
Well,
sorry, it's the only gun we got. We have to either use this or you have to surrender, one or the other.
Right.
Please surrender.
Right. Right. Yeah, you're begging them. Please don't make us pull the trigger. Yeah. No, and I agree. And and maybe I don't know. Maybe Pirates of Drenax ruined me, but I'm used to that level of action, and there is a lot of walking on eggshells in Deep Night Revelation.
Yeah,
a lot of it.
What our Harrier solution we just came up with, it's still untested somewhat, but we've got 9 ion missiles.
Yes, on the Harrier. Well, the Harrier.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've armed the Harrier. They
If you
did.
can afford it, I mean, those ion missiles are expensive. Aren't they like $250,000 a piece?
They're
Yeah.
750,000 each.
Yeah, that.
No.
I mean, yeah, it ain't
But-
cheap.
No,
Especially-
it's not cheap. But if all right, let's say you fire 3 missiles.
Well, and they did upgrade the turret to a triple turret, so they can
Yeah.
fire a volley of 3 missiles at one.
Right.
But even then, you have to be almost point blank. Otherwise, it's
They have
so
a chance to shoot him down. Right.
it's so easy for somebody
But-
with sensors to just knock them out. Of
Right, but you're talking about short range pirating messages on a stealth ship. The plan is to creep up on them
Right.
and then nail them with 3 ion missiles.
Right.
Yeah, no, I agree. At close range, it's a very effective close range.
And then,
it's
yeah.
expensive. It's very expensive, but effective.
Well,
close
if
range.
you take their ship and you have the barrack space to have a backup crew to man these ships that you take.
Right.
And if just at the chop shop market, let's say you only get 25% of ship value. Okay.
Right.
And I make it difficult for them to resell stolen ships because, I mean, let's face it, it's not easy. I mean,
Right, but I
you
mean
think
that's
VIN
just
numbers are bad on cars
Right.
now.
What we've been doing is hacking them and then using the admin roles to basically give them new.
Yeah, give them entirely new
Well,
registers.
yeah.
backgrounds.
well.
And
See, then you get a higher payback value out of the ship than what I'm talking about. I'm just saying,
But we haven't
What
been selling them. We've been giving them to NPCs to use for tactical reasons.
right,
They've
yeah.
done, they've
We've
put
done
those
some of
into
that.
their own fleet
Yeah.
a couple of times, yeah.
But-
But
Lately, I've been selling them.
but even
I've
at
been hawking them.
25%, that's a good chunk of change.
Yeah, that's on a 50 million. Well, to keep it, on a 50 million ship, you're still clearing easy at 20%. You're getting, $5 million, right? Or 10
Right.
million, 10 million bucks. So that 10 million, you spent 3 million on missiles. Cool. And now you have 7 million left over to grease
divvy
the
up
ship
and-
crew and
yeah.
then pay. I'm just saying that is fuck the cargo. Just if you can get a black market ship thing going, to sell ships at just at 25% of face value, and that's those ion
Yep.
missiles, they'll pay for themselves in ship stealing.
Yeah, no, it's a different dynamic than it is for Deep Night, and I
Yeah.
think honestly, and I mean completely honest, I think Deep Night Revelation, its biggest problem is that it is a sandbox, but the sandbox is too fucking big. I mean, you took Pirates of Drenax, which is a sandbox that actually happens really not even an entire sector, but like maybe one band in the middle of a sector. And you've instead taken Deep Night Revelation that essentially every couple of sessions changes the sandbox to an entirely new whole sector of space. And it's like, whew, that's a lot of work.
Well, I think my issue with it is just that it's got mixed signals because you get this feeling that this trip needs to be, that you can't mess around. That this is a tight. We don't want to be out in space so damn long that you all die of old age.
Right.
We want to get you back, so you need to hurry.
Yeah.
But then as a player, you're going, it feels like there's a lot more material here, and yet we're rushing past it.
And you're hitting all of the points that I have as a referee reading
So
it.
I feel like if they want to they should have set it up as a race and made it be like a race where the encounters and everything are really more obstacles towards how can we refuel and get out of here as quickly as possible, so that you're treating those issues, all those encounters that we've had would have been more based around the idea of how does this slow you down or prevent you, or how can they help you on this race that you're in, versus the more Star Trek go out and explore, which which would be the more take a leisurely approach to this, get to know these cultures, set up some kind of diplomatic embassy or something, that's there so that, in the future, as we expand further, we'll have already made this positive, foothold with this alien society.
Right.
And so that, because I think both of those would have been very valid campaigns, but this kind of made you feel like you're sort of somewhere in the middle,
Right.
and that's awkward.
Right. And
Yeah.
that's kind of how I felt since going through this. Like I said, this leg kind of slows things down more to something that I'm used to. Now, like I said, I bought the World Builder's Handbook because, in my opinion, the so I planet system generation from the core rulebook. So
Right.
my problem with the system generation from the core rulebook is almost that it assumes that you're generating a system that is going to be in or near core space.
Right.
And that is not necessarily going to be true. But it seems that the math in the roles are all geared in that direction. So then you go to I've got the Great Rift box set. And you go in there and they have some expanded generation, and that's pretty good. But it's not extremely detailed. So it'll generate the main world. It kind of gives you a roundabout for the star, and that's about it. Like it might generate an unusual body in the system. Like maybe there's a secondary that might be a brown dwarf or something. There's a possibility for that, but aside from that, that's about it. So not super detailed compared to the core book. So then I go to the referee's handbook out of Deep Night, and it has quick generation system, which to my chagrin is actually the dice rolls are exactly the opposite, but generate the same effect as the rolls in the DSS handbook from the Great Rift box set. So they're essentially exactly the same. And so I was dismayed at discovering that. And so I decided to order the World Builder's Handbook because, I mean, from the description, that sounds like the direction I want to go. Holy shit, it goes way over the top. Like there is math in there that I'm not joking. I had to set my calculator to the scientific mode for the math that was in there. And there was some math in there that I had to actually go back and remember and actually figure out how it was to put in those equations into a calculator. I was like, how did I used to do this? Because I haven't done these kinds of equations since college. And I mean, because despite what your high school teacher told you, no, you're probably not going to use this in everyday life. He lied. He absolutely lied.
Well, I mean, I use a lot of common tricks, especially in geometry, in everyday life. Hell, I use the 3-4-5 method to find true 90-degree angles
Right.
all the fucking time.
Yeah,
because it works.
This is beyond that. Like,
yeah.
Like some of these I'm not joking. If you guys want to really blow your mind, go through the World Builder's Handbook, and some of the equations are just outrageous. It's like Will was laughing when I said I cannot think of a time ever in any science fiction game where I've ever been playing where a player came to me and said, "Hey, what's the axial tilt of this planet?"
Right.
Who the fuck cares, right? Like, I don't know, 10 degrees. Oh, well, the weather's going to be really... who cares, But you have to figure that out in order to figure out whether or not the percentage chance that it's going to be tidally locked. And then you have to figure out, well, how many moons does it have? Is it tidally locked to one of those moons, or is it tidally locked to the star? It's like, oh my god! And there's
It,
this whole
it can be
long
interesting
equation.
it can be interesting just in terms of the impact it has on a culture. I mean, if you have a really tilted planet, they're going to have really erratic seasons, and so
Right.
so when you start thinking about the archaeology, the architecture, it does have an impact.
It does.
If it usually doesn't have an impact unless it's radical, right? If it's got something weird to it, that's where you're going, okay, well, how would they adapt to this? And then you
Right.
kind of that gives you some ideas. And so yeah, it can make a difference, but
Well,
yeah,
that's like I was. That's why I said. I mean, I was on the one hand, going through the World Builders Handbook, I was massively impressed at the level that they went to with it. On the other
right.
hand, I was disappointed that they didn't make it, more friendly to the referee. Because what I really wanted, give me some D66 tables. For Traveler uses D66, plus or minus your DMs for the first or second dice. Give me some tables that I can roll on that will generate. Just let me make some, 4 or 5 rolls to generate a system that is believable. And there's no reason they couldn't have done that.
Right.
I mean, it wouldn't have been a 300-page book, but I mean, I suppose it could have been, but I mean, give me a bunch of tables. I don't have to use all the tables, but
you could cover it in about 20 pages on a supplement,
right.
and add some other flavor and fluff to string that out even more and make it more appealing visually as a there's man.
Well, the
Yeah.
other downside of the World Builder's Handbook, unlike, like, for instance, the Robot Handbook, the Vehicle Handbook, or even the Weapons Guide in the Field Handbook, or the Field Guide, where you can design your own weapons. Though the World Builder's Handbook has no starting point, so it doesn't have a flow chart that says start here and develop the star and then go here. There's none of that. It just has chapters where it's like, okay, well, here's the star and here's a whole shitload of advanced astrophysics mathematics, and then here's how you generate the main world, and you could generate additional worlds, and these are the types of gas giants that will show up. And it's like, dude, like, where, what, you know and some of the chapters aren't even in order. Is my biggest complaint. Like,
And this is a new release.
yeah, yeah,
That's really too bad because so far the Mongoose stuff has been pretty good quality.
yeah. No, like I wouldn't say that it's low quality, but it does not have that direction of start here and end here. And if you're looking at something about like a World Builder's Handbook, especially something that complicated, I would think that a flow chart, from start to finish, would have been a wise choice. Now they do have, like, they've got like 3 different types of examples. One being, a known world or a known system, and one example that they give is Corella of the Corellan League over in the Spinward Exodus, and they go through how it was developed and more or less how it ended up that way.
Right.
Then they have another one, which is a world that they are a system that they've created completely using the rules in the book. It's a brand new system, doesn't exist anywhere. And then the last one is a modeling of what our solar system is like. And so they've got these 3 different capabilities of, you can expand on a system that's already core in the books. You can create your own system, or you can model it on a real life existing model. And that's
Right.
great, but it still doesn't tell you where to start and where you're done. And like I said, the chapters aren't necessarily in order. So you'll get to the end of like the chapter on stars, and it will mention that one of the possibilities of your generation of all this math is that you will generate a unusual body, such as a quasar or a black hole or something like that. And you think, I will turn the page and then it's going to give me information on
Yeah,
those.
the table for that.
And it's not. It is actually, that stuff is actually all the way at the end of the book in a whole chapter by itself. Like literally it's like one of the last chapters. And I'm like, okay, well, who came up with the placement of this and why?
Right.
Is that what, did you use that stuff on what we're dealing with on the batshit crazy part 2?
No, that was generated way before that book came out. The stuff that you're doing right now for the sequel is stuff that I created about 4.5 years ago.
Okay.
And it's been sitting on my cutting room floor because essentially stuff that I have written for that I've never been entirely happy with, and now I'm coming back and I just kind of let it sit because I got disgusted with it. But now I'm kind of coming back to it, and there is some stuff out of that I think can be salvaged. And so I like that as the beginning, and or what we're doing as the beginning, and I think that there's other stuff that might be salvageable in one way or another. If that
Oh,
makes
so
sense.
we're gonna force you to figure it the fuck out.
Yeah, kind
Is
of.
what
But
we're doing.
but
Yeah.
I have a whole bunch of scraps that I'm grabbing from, and I'll figure it the fuck out. Yeah, basically, you guys are gonna help me make the sequel to this because I've been trying. I promised that there were gonna be 3 in that adventure, and I
Right.
wrote 1, and then when I went to write the sequel, I was like, none of it's not coming out. And
Yeah.
the big change in that is that when I wrote the original, I was working at Amazon, and so my job at Amazon was I was quality assurance and inventory control, and so basically my day for 10 hours a day was to do a step master and a squat, which is how I destroyed my knee. And these robots would bring me these cubes, and they would turn the cube, and this cube is like 2 stories tall, and I would count. It would face it one side to me, and I would face all the bins in it, and I had a lot of time. I'm not gonna joke. It's a really brainless job, and I fucking loved it. I loved that job because it was brainless. I didn't have to think. All I did all day was in my head. I would write, and then I would go home and go and dump it, and
yeah, I've had jobs like that.
Yeah, it was fantastic. As a writer, it was great. I got paid a shitload of money. I got great benefits, and essentially, I was writing the entire time I was there. And so I had this side gig going on that also ended up generating money. It was fantastic.
And aside from your knees turning to shit, you were probably in pretty good shape.
Yeah. Oh, dude, I was in great shape. But like I said, that knee went out, and that was pretty much the end of that. And, if it wasn't for the bad knee, I honestly, I think I'd probably still be working there. And I probably would have turned down promotions because I didn't want to be taken away from that job because it was so great for writing. It was just fantastic.
Yeah. If I was doing your hustle that you're doing, I would do an edit of my first edition, and I wouldn't release it just yet, but I would, I know you've gotten tons of feedback over the years, and there's some things that maybe you would change. And so I would take a moment and kind of do that. I would tweak the original venture, as a lot of advice you had to have had. I'd take that into account because one, that gives the people that took the time to go through it and then comment or reach out to you, it gives them the sense that they were at least heard and or whatever. So you build a more loyal person to come listen to your bullshit the next time that you do things. But
Right.
then at the same time, I'd release my new part 2 because that will people will see the part 2 and be like, well, hell, there was a part 1, and oh, look, they got the edited version, and they can go straight to your thing. You can release both of them at the same. I don't know, but I would do something to let all the people that gave feedback, know through actions and not words. So like a quick tweak
Yeah.
to change some things. Of course, that might be a lot, but then I'd hit that part 2 with it, and
Well,
then.
the other problem that I'm having right now is that I've changed my focus writing from the days when I was doing, because when I wrote the original Mystery BTSHT 365, when I wrote that original, um, Traveler was my secondary game, and my primary game I was running D&D 5th edition. So those two games, as weird as it might sound, um, adventure-wise, can match up very nicely. And the
Okay.
reason that I say that is that both of them, there is a heavy plot to it. There is not necessarily. I don't want to say railroading, but um,
So
almost in that sense, there is this designated start and finish, and that's how it's supposed to go. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, and my writing since then has changed more to world building. So now I spend more time um, outside of the plot of whatever adventure or campaign to developing an entire world or universe to encompass that.
Right.
And so, like Braunhaven is more of an entire world. The plot that I'm running is my own internal monologue that we're playing, but um, the focus is really on the world. And I, you know, old school Traveler was in a lot of ways similar to that, and some of that has gotten lost, I think, with second edition Mongoose, in that um,
well, second edition Mongoose makes it much easier to get a ship. A
right.
lot of
Yes,
a
they
lot of
do.
a lot of traveler campaigns never ever got a
Yeah, a lot
ship
of Traveler
or even
campaigns,
got off
you were
the
writing the
planet,
subsidized liners, man. You were a passenger.
or may never have left your starting planet.
Right.
And so that was, there were a lot of campaigns that started with you having very little money
Right.
and doing shitty jobs for 5 to 10 grand,
Right.
trying to scrape up enough money to start.
Well, and a lot of the old schoolers that have never played second edition, they're still playing first edition. Whenever a lot of times they'll see our campaigns and they'll be like, they'll watch Pirates of You're giving out way too much money. Maybe for you guys, I would be giving out too much money, but it's nothing for pirates in a second edition campaign to scalp a ship with a faked registry for a ship that's worth 25 million and rake in 4 to 5 million profit for themselves.
Well,
That's nothing.
I think one of the things to keep in mind when all that happens is how much of that mortgage was paid off when the
That
ship
too.
was
That
taken.
too.
Because
Well,
that to me is always the big thing, is that if that pirate only owned like 20% of that ship, that's a lot of money that insurance company just lost, and they're going to probably put some money down on a reward.
well,
And
and recently on and I know I think at least Will is. They're on Facebook. There's the Traveler RPG group, and then there's the Mongoose Traveler RPG group. And on the Traveler RPG group, there was recently this guy had asked. He was new, and
yeah,
said he picked up the core rule book and he wanted to know everybody's opinion on what are the next 2 books that he should absolutely own. And my immediate suggestion was, of course, Central Supply Catalog
yeah,
and High Guard. You have to have those. I mean, even if you don't ever plan to build a ship, you have to have High Guard just for the back section of all of the standard ships. You just need to have it. And so, and then I said my third and fourth options. Number 3 would be the Traveler Companion, and number 4 would be the Vehicle Handbook. I find the Vehicle Handbook to be immensely useful. I realize that there are problems with it. Yes, fusion reactors in the Vehicle Handbook are not right. They've got the math wrong. They need to fix that. But again, even if you don't ever plan to make your own vehicle, and you don't ever have to because they're pretty much all covered, you can just tweak whatever's already there.
Right.
The entire section of available vehicles is useful. I would recommend that they place them in an order from the lowest TL to the highest. That would make life a ton easier.
I mean, I would suggest an adventure probably before, like the robot or
Yeah, well, and he had even said, outside of purchasing
Gotcha.
adventure.
Okay, yeah, like one really good adventure would probably be more helpful than even the companion.
But definitely number 3 is the companion, because there is stuff in the companion that fills in the blanks that the core rulebook misses. Information on the broad skills, excellent stuff. What the one that we have discovered and really enjoy, well, I don't know about really enjoy, but that is infinitely helpful, is information on wilderness refueling at gas giants.
Oh yeah.
What are the different layers of a gas giant? What is the penalties or the effects of attacking somebody that is in lower layers of a gas giant that's refueling, and what layer do you refuel at for optimum? I mean, they're great. They're
the
great
refueling rules are god awful in my but I mean, you're looking at this going, no one would do this. This is
it would be insane, right?
Yeah, because even a single point of damage to your ship is so expensive compared to gas to fuel, and it's just you'd think that there would be there'd be drones that would just, I mean, even if it takes a while, but drones that would just be going in and out of
in a lot of cases there are. I
atmosphere.
mean, you don't necessarily they don't show it in the books, but there are plenty of examples in adventures where they even state, oh, well, there's drones that go out and collect the gas.
Yeah, because I mean, I would imagine a ship like Deep Knight is getting into a close low orbit and then just having drones go.
I would imagine that for the amount that you have been, or the speed of which you have been refueling, they are probably going at least to the deep. And the deep, they're at -2 for their piloting checks. It is a difficult.
You really think
10
they're bringing
plus.
a ship? You really think they're bringing a ship that size into that?
Oh no! They're sending small craft.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So I mean, each of these small craft are making multiple passes at a 10 plus piloting check with a -2 to their check.
Well, I mean, as it is, it says just to fill a normal spaceship, you're making like 30, 40,
Right, and they're doing that inside of 3 days. So these piloting crews are.
But I mean, just to fill in its own tanks, a ship has to make.
Yeah, I don't think going to the deep is ever really. I don't see why anyone would ever do that.
Well, you can go to the deep shallows and you can refuel, but it takes twice the time.
Yeah, but I mean, again, I mean, okay.
But there you're only at -1.
Yeah,
it's
right.
the risk versus reward. It's
right.
Crazy.
Yeah, I just don't get it. Okay, so you need to do, in order to leave the deep, right? You have to roll. Basically, you have to account for a 12.
Right, because you have to make a piloting check every time you cross a layer.
Right, so you need to make the check and so you need to basically account for a 12 because you're taking a -2 and you need a 10. So you basically have to bring somehow on the dice. You need to account for at least a 12, and so I mean,
and you're technically doing it like 40 times.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and so all right, I get it. You fail, and then the power check kicks in to
See,
see
and
if
I,
you
I don't
fuck the
I don't
power up.
call for that many rolls.
Yeah,
I'll do one roll and be like, okay, yeah, you're
I don't think anybody calls for that many rolls.
right.
It's just it's always reading it. You're just going, well, this just doesn't
Well,
mechanic.
and a
right.
lot of
Yeah,
times, like when you guys are like a lot of times, I will make a background roll just to see if something happened. And just because something happened doesn't necessarily mean that you guys have to even get involved. You know what I mean?
yeah. I
Yeah,
just
just because somebody stubbed their toe at work doesn't necessarily mean that the
Right.
supervisor has to get called in every time.
uh,
So, there have been a couple times where there have been some minor incidents, but not usually they recover.
But
Usually.
the thing
the
is that when
shout.
you,
Yeah,
yeah, the thing is that when you think about what this mission is, and the fact that like not a single one of these ships is really expendable, it just seems like a really unnecessary.
Drones seemed like they would have been a smarter route. I agree.
Sure.
And
yeah.
Traveler seems, especially Mongoose Second Edition, seems very inconsistent as far as how they handle that. So in some adventures you will read, or even in like the Trojan Reach book um out of Pirates of Drenax, will describe some worlds as having fuel stations around a gas giant using drones. And these drones just go out, scoop, and come back and dump it into a repository, and they go back just endlessly.
It makes perfect sense.
Right.
You'd have the station have solar panels that charge the drones. The drones don't go out unless it's once it drops below a certain volume, and so you just have this automated fuel spot where it may take a while for it to refuel, but it doesn't matter because
Right.
you're only passing through every few
And
weeks,
you've got some drone operators sitting in the control room who's snorting
or even
powdered Nordax,
or
and
even a or even a robot.
or even a robot. Yeah, possibly even a drone controller, because
You'd
that's in the robot handbook too. Yeah.
Right.
So I mean, all of that, they're very inconsistent, and I kind of first ran into this running the initial adventure to Deep Night Revelation, where we were talking about Deep Night Endeavor. And so the way Deep Night Endeavor is built is that it has actually 6 different fuel tanks that are detachable and actually
Right.
operate individually as fuel shuttles. And they can individually go out and scoop fuel and then come back. And I'm like,
Wow.
why the fuck would you do that? you know, that just seems dumb. Why would you
Well,
do that?
but I mean, if you think about it, the others aren't scooping. Maybe there's a limit how much they can scoop at a time. I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah,
Just
I mean,
seems
I just don't understand why they wouldn't use drones. And a lot of it, what I have determined, comes down to back what I was saying. The whole story, the plot, is the overall guiding feature. Is that the game moves at the speed of plot line, and so in order for Deep Night Endeavor to have its problem, um,
well.
it couldn't have fuel drones.
I think yeah. But like my complaint about the pacing thing. I think that the mistake was that the race was to get to a certain point.
Well, no,
Wasn't there's that ship that was waiting for us to show up so that we could switch out crew and everything.
well, the pacing thing, that could be my fault.
But I mean, wasn't that a point where that we needed a rendezvous with another Imperium ship
Yeah,
that was
well, you needed to make a rendezvous with Denman, and those guys had been
yeah.
out there already for 2 years.
And so I think that I
And that
think
kind of,
that,
that did
I think
set.
I think at that point in the campaign they should have really done a whole thing where it's okay, as of this point the race is over. You've made it to Denman in the
Now you can
speed.
take your time, right?
Now you can take it. Yeah, I mean, maybe that would have been a better, like a way to let you know that okay, that was the real race.
So,
Was you need to get to Denman within that much time. But
so the first expansion book was Rift's Edge Transit, which there was a whole bunch of shit in there. And some of that even was kind of a a disjointed mess, but at least there was at least enough of a thread that I was able to get us through it. And I agree with you. I think that in reading it, I'm not disagreeing with you on the pacing at all. But like I said, your excuse me, your perception of the pacing might be my fault. But in my defense, what I'm relaying to you as far as the pacing of the adventure goes, is because of what I'm directly reading, and I'm like,
Sure.
I'm having a hard time making points A and B connect.
Well,
in
I
some
could
cases.
definitely. I mean, the idea that we needed to rendezvous with that ship and that they would be able to return to Imperium space, it would definitely make sense why we'd want to rush
Right.
to make that on time, if not early. So that certainly does, in my mind, have you
Well,
would
at
have
the at the start of Rift's Edge Transit, it makes the point that there is a there's not a, I don't want to say demand, but there is a feeling of rush that you want to get through there as quickly as possible. And the whole time reading it, my thought on it was, knowing what's coming in Near Side of Yonder is why. Why was there this rush to get through Rift's Edge Transit? I mean, other than the fact that you're trying to get obviously all the way to Terminus Point, but which is the overall end of the mission anyways. Why was there a rush to get through there and not
right.
Near Side of Yonder? And like I said, the Near Side of Yonder, I mean, if we're talking about being on the wrong side of the rift, you already wanted to go from Tobiah to Denman and completely left out the fact that you weren't going to be able to skirt the Aslan Herate to begin with. Why didn't you just cross at the islands? So
That's traveling a lot of distance through Aslan space.
true. Yeah, the Aslan are
That's a lot of Aslan
Yeah.
space versus the amount we went through.
Yeah, the Herate's much bigger on the southern side than it is on the northern. But but you see my point. It's like, well,
and there's a very good likelihood that they would want to mount a similar expedition if they figured out that the Imperium's doing this. Who knows? I guess it makes sense. I don't know. It's an interesting case. I want, like I say, I'm curious how many people have actually played through this.
Yeah, I went looking, and what I found was that everybody kept coming back to me going, "Oh, we love your stuff," and I'm like, "That's great. Does anybody have any ideas?" Because
right,
I'm like, "Help me," So, yeah, I don't know if there's anybody else out there doing it. So,
because that's like, I know Eric Mona over at Paizo. He's more of an editor, but he's written a lot of stuff for them too. And he always talked about how he wrote this one book for an adventure path, and he goes, that it's he wrote it was an adventure for Pathfinder Society that required you to be level 12. It was like the graduation thing.
Oh, right.
Could play it. And he goes, yeah, it really is frustrating me because that was a really well-written adventure, and yet so few people are ever going to play it.
Ever played it, right?
And so you sort of wonder if that becomes the case of like book 9 of Deep, as you get towards the bottom of the box set, it's like how many people have actually played through this adventure?
What?
You start wondering, how many campaigns make it this long?
Being the referee. Now I haven't read all of these books cover to cover. Some of these, I'm learning maybe 2 weeks ahead of you guys. So I'm as shocked at some of this stuff as you are, and some of it makes me very excited. There's a lot of stuff in this leg of the adventure that makes me very excited. But having said that, I am privy and having the box set. I did read the end, and I will say I am excited for the end. So like I was excited for the beginning, and I'm really excited for the end. It's the in between that's the problem. It's the getting from here to there that seems to be the biggest issue with Deep Night Revelation. But the end is huge, and it's enormous. It is mind-bogglingly huge.
Cool.
And but it's just that in between part that can be uh, frustrating at times. Like I said, but I you know it is teaching me things though. And so, like I was saying, my writing style has changed to world building. Um, I have been working over the past year or so. I have been developing my own RPG game and my own sci-fi RPG game and my own world based around that. It's not Traveler, although there have been times where I thought about scrapping it and going with Cepheus Engine, um, but I kind of like the direction that it's going currently, so I think I'm going to keep it. But it is an old school D&D type game with levels and classes and the whole bit, but it does have it has an entire world, and I'm focusing more on building the world. And like one of the biggest things that I worked on that I'm shocked that nobody has done this before, and I'm just baffled that something like this hasn't made it into Traveler or even Star Wars RPG. But your ship would be rolled up as a character.
That's. I mean, there is a playbook for your ship in what's I'm trying to remember the name of the Night's Black Agents, not Night's Black, Blades of the Dark variant. What is it? So Forged in the Dark, sci-fi.
If I was wanting to get off into anything new or try to branch out, I think the thing that would interest me most would be something centered around being a dragon rider. Maybe part of a nation's defense thing or whatever.
Yeah.
But to role play a dragon rider that cares for the dragon, and then there's some bonds that kind of got to be associated with that to whatever. But I think that would be really fun.
That would be from a game master standpoint. That could be really cool, but you'd have to be really, really careful because dragons are so powerful.
Yes, and humans are squishy.
Right.
Yeah.
And you would have to play that. I mean, essentially, for the most part, the dragon would have its own, kind of like Game of Thrones, where Daenerys is like, "Oh well, I've got these 3 dragons," and then the dragons get older, and the dragons are like, "No, fuck you. I've got other things that I want. I've got dragon things to do," and they take off, and she doesn't see them for a year and a half, and then they come back. All of a sudden, and are like, "Hello, we're home, Mom," and they drop a fried dead goat at her feet, and want scritches behind their horny ears, and they give their dragon purrs, and then they take off again, and you don't see them for another 6 months. That would be kind of along the lines that I would be going with. Because you run into the same problem with that you run into when
it's your Gundam suit, right?
Yeah, right. It's your Gundam, but you run into the same problem that you run into with the Paladin and I remember when they introduced this, Find Steed. And so in old school first edition D&D, and you've got the one Paladin player, and he's like, "Okay, well I'm going to do Find Steed." And it's like, why are you finding Steed? You're in the middle of a fucking dungeon, dude. Where do you think a Destrier is going to go in a dungeon? And so you run into this problem of, well, the dragon can't go into the dungeon.
Right. Well, I mean, that's part of the reason why it would take the game master to
that becomes part of the game, right?
Yeah. That's part of the game.
Right.
You
Yeah,
just
it's
you need a reason for the dragons and the humans or the sentient, people with whether it be dwarves, elves, humans, whatever. But you need a reason for the dragons to want to tolerate them if they got a benefit, like the bond between a dragon and a dragon
Oh,
rider
definitely.
actually
Oh,
makes
100%.
the dragon more powerful as well. Now this dragon has access to certain powers that because of the
Completely.
channeling and the bonding with the rider. So now they want to protect the rider.
Right.
And then you limit the amount of breaths they can take. So, your rider's not always subjected to dragon breath.
Right.
So and then dragons can be immune to dragon breath. So it makes it, a little less,
But- essentially, you're telling like an anime Gundam story, right? Where most of the time, if they're fighting with their Gundam, they're fighting with their
Yeah.
dragon, and so the fights
Yeah.
are scaled for that type of fight. Sometimes they're fighting when they're not in their Gundam armor, in which case the
Oh.
fights are scaled for without armor.
It's
and
like when you're
Sure.
running an old school BattleTech game and you're mixing in Mech Warrior.
right. They just
Sometimes you're on foot, sometimes you're in your mech.
Yeah, and opposing dragon riders, of different dragon riding factions or something. Maybe they do worms. I don't know, but they too would be jumping off of their dragons or mounts and wanting to engage you away from your mount because they know if they can, if I can kill you here while you're hanging out in the town hall away
Right.
from your dragon, then your dragon's weaker, and then my dragon and me can go kill your dragon. And so I mean, there's all kinds of different ways about it. If there could be a competition to bond with the dragon, as you're coming up and getting powerful enough to have all the dings and whistles to have leveled enough to ride a dragon, right?
Right.
Yeah, and
Go from Dragon Squire to Dragon Knight or
yeah. So other squires would be trying to fuck you off, as you go through the procedure. Because if you kill your
I imagine
competition,
that school has a high attrition rate.
man, that's the
Graduation's
whole fucking
a bitch.
man. There's this book series. It's the Empyrean series. But the first one is called Fourth Wing, and the second one's Iron Flame, and that's the fucking setting. Is these people are trying to earn the right to go bond with a
Basically,
dragon.
Harry Potter with dragon riders.
Yeah. Well, that's what it is, and some sex. There's a lot of sex scenes in it,
of course.
but it's the writer calls it a romanta fantasy, but. The dragon concept of the school and the dragons channel you powers so you can do cool shit and you get a unique kind of signet power from the dragon. And then they've got griffin riders and they do more ruin magic really well. So it's got a universe. And then there's these people that are channeling power straight from the earth and it drains the earth of the magic. And they have worms or wyverns, I guess, that they create, but it goes the other way with them. But in the college, it's like fly or die, bitch, because you just to get in, you have to walk the parapet, and people, if you can't walk a parapet, you can't walk up a fucking dragon, and so people die on the first day joining that. And then you get your unique ability. Like some motherfuckers are healers, and other motherfuckers have power to like wield lightning and shit. There's some powers that are kind of outlawed. Like if you are a Trinsic or you can read minds or whatever, they'll fuck you off because they have a whole bunch of secrets floating around the war college.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, it's really a good read. It's a best-selling stuff. There's audiobooks are really well narrated. If you got an Audible account and want to toss a credit, they're worth it. But I since I read them though, I really really think the idea of some kind of dragon riding game where and I've also been fucking playing a fucking black dragon.
He is.
On
you're kind of into it because you got polymorphed permanently into being a black dragon. So
yeah,
But yeah, when I started making this game, I like at its core, I got the one of the first things I got to thinking about, because it's a sci-fi space game. It's not,
Yeah.
it will have some cyberpunk elements to it, but it is at its core a sci-fi space game. And I go and I think about most of the iconic space franchises that we know. You think Star Trek, well, there's the Enterprise, and you think Star Wars, well, there's the Millennium Falcon. And I mean, that could even be extended somewhat to Luke's, in Star Wars, to Luke's original X-wing. You think about Battlestar Galactica, well, the Galactica itself. All of these ships are more than just rivets and bolts being turned off of a line. They are a character in the show in and of themselves.
Like the Millennium Falcon.
The Millennium Falcon is a perfect example. The Enterprise is a perfect example. Those ships are not only characters, but they are possibly the main character of the show.
In the Millennium Falcon, the only one that's basically in all of the Star Wars movies to one extent or another.
I believe so, yeah. I mean, yeah.
I don't think there's another ship that has just always been kind of fucking around. Maybe not the first one, I don't know.
But I mean, think about like what at the end of Star Trek 3 when the Enterprise got blown up. I mean, there were people in the movie theater. I remember seeing this when I was a kid in the movie theater. There were people that were crying.
Yeah, it was very shocking. I remember, before we even saw it, people had fucking kind of spoiled it. They're like, "Oh man, they fucked the fucking Enterprise up," and I was like, "Oh man, what?"
Right. Yeah, and then you got but I mean,
there was like a trailer.
Even somebody telling you that before you saw the movie,
Yeah.
seeing it on the big screen was an emotional moment. And so
and Kirk took it like a champ.
Right, and it occurred to me, I'm like, for a game, for the ship to have real meaning to the characters, I think that it needs to be rolled up as a character itself. Does that make sense?
Well, it just has different attributes than your player.
It will have some slightly different attributes, yeah, but it will be rolled up and it will have its own quirks. It will have its, each ship will be individual to that group. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can see that.
So that was kind of the big thing that I'm doing with this new game, and I'm only about, God, I don't even think that I'm a quarter way through it. I mean, I'm slowly working my way through classes, and I haven't worked on it in a while, but I'm towards the end of making the classes available, and then I'm gonna, of course, go through combat rules and initiative and all of that. That stuff's fairly easy. Because I mean, if you've ever played old school D&D, it's basically what we're already playing on Saturdays, but in a sci-fi style. And then I'll get into ships, and of course, equipment's going to be a whole other beast. And then the slowdown, of course, aside from generating the chapters on ships and equipment, the real slowdown is going to be, I have to create a monster manual, because what I want for this book is similar to like the original Pathfinder. When you bought Pathfinder, you didn't have to buy Pathfinder and then a monster manual and then a DM's guide. You bought the Pathfinder core book, and it was in this gigantic tome, and it was all in there.
Right.
You didn't have to buy 3 books, which is kind of the route that I'm wanting to go for with this one, because I don't know. If it's world building, it's one thing that you release books as you're doing it. But if it's a game rule system, I really feel like the idea of the player's handbook and the DMG and the monster manual being in 3 separate books is really geared more towards being a money grab. than
Well,
it
it
is the
Do you
depends.
see that?
convenience.
Do you see that? Because I don't think players tend to buy the monster manual. And so one could
Yeah.
argue that that means that it's the monster bestiary separate is actually less of a money grab because only 1 in 6 people or 1 in 4 people are going to buy it.
But in an ideal world, anybody that plays the game should be able to pick it up and should have the opportunity to run
Uh,
their own game.
you should be able to buy a box set that has the 3 right there, because when you've got 4 or 5 people sitting around a table, man, you really just need the player's handbook laid out there.
Yeah, you just need
And yeah,
the core.
right. And then very rarely with a game master, the game master should know the player's handbook in and out very well, or should not be running the game. So
Well,
I
you
mean,
say that, but 5th edition is so complicated with the player's handbook that you
right.
have to have one
But
on hand and look
well,
shit
you
up.
need one on hand, but I mean, it shouldn't need to be referenced all the fucking time
Right.
by the game master. The game master should have a fair enough hand on what's in that. Not doesn't have to know word for word,
Right.
but you need to know the rules, and they're generally covered there in that for the gameplay.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
and then you want the monster manual kind of on the side, because in theory you work the shit out of the monster manual. You're always looking up the stat block.
My point is, so like if you're looking at 5th edition D&D, you're now talking they're what, up to $70 now per book?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, you're right.
And so you got to buy $70 if you want all. Let's say that you are just a player, and the only book that you ever buy is the player's handbook. But 5 games into it, you decide, hey, you know what? I want to try to run a game on my own. In order to do that effectively, you now need to spend $140 buying another $2. I don't think that that's right.
But yeah, well, the real kicker is that you really don't need the Dungeon Master's hand guide.
Yeah, the Dungeon Master's Guide. I mean, I will say,
It's got handy tables.
even with 5th edition, I mean, for just the magic items alone, it's worth it. But there is a lot of information in the Dungeon Master's Guide that most players, especially the ones that you see on Twitter, are completely unaware of. And so there's a lot of stuff in the Dungeon Master's Guide, even for 5th edition, that you could technically run 5th edition as an old school game.
Sure, there's a lot of gems in the Dungeon Master's Guide, but I'm saying, if really to run a game of 5e Dungeons and Dragons, right?
Yeah,
you
you
really
don't-
only need the player's hand guide and a monster manual, and then really an adventure, and that's really all you need.
Yeah, and you really need the monster manual because they don't list the stats in most of the adventures.
Yeah.
They just put the name of the creature in bold and tell you to look it up.
I mean, but the Dungeon Master's Guide, you really don't even get into that until you kind of step up into a little bit more advanced bit of it. If you're homebrewing, you want the fucking DMG.
Yeah.
But you don't necessarily need it just to run,
Yeah, if you're running something out
published
if you're
shit.
running a published adventure, you don't necessarily need it. No, you're right.
Yep. And they dropped the ball by not investing in they were so quick on these setting books. They didn't even put any shit in them with them,
Well, and then they screwed that up because they mixed their settings books with their campaigns. So you I want to read about Waterdeep. Well, you don't get just Waterdeep. You get maybe 50 25 pages of information about Waterdeep. The rest of it you get to learn as you play through the campaign. And I'm like, no. I want a whole book of just Waterdeep.
Well, the problem has been that when they've released a whole book of just Waterdeep, about 1 in 4 game masters buy it, no players buy it, and so one person out of 24 buys that book, and so it doesn't. They found that they jammed a few really good feats in there or something, then they could increase the number of players that buy it because they all want to buy it
because they want those feats.
Give those feats to their character, and the GM's being a jackass and saying that they have to have the book. But that's basically what happens. It's the reason those setting books don't do very well. It's really tough. It's a tricky thing.
If you had adventures that ran in that setting book more, and not something that you depend on
Well, and
other people to
that's kind of the
write, that
key
you're gonna
too.
fuck them over because they get successful writing for your books.
That is
Then
part of the key
yeah,
too, is that you have to release adventures that support that particular book.
yeah,
You
and
can't just release it
yeah,
into a vacuum and be like, okay, the next thing.
yeah,
No, there
and then
there has to be more.
they did it with Dragonlance. They released the setting book, and then they added the dragon the adventure,
Right.
but the adventure was kind of poorly written,
A
and
couple of
and
them, yeah, they were not
uh,
well
We
done.
started the Dragonlance
yeah,
5e campaign, and we got through like the first book, I think, and then that was our game master burned out.
Well, I can even go back to I played the original AD&D Dragonlance Adventures, and even they weren't they weren't very well written. And the problem that you really ran into with those is that the book came out before the adventure, and so at
Right.
that time, with everybody, like literally everybody that was breathing, both boy or girl, was going out and buying those fucking books and reading them. They were devouring them. And so then you try to run those adventures, and you run into one of two situations. One, you would run into the people that are like, oh well, we want to play the characters from the books. I'm like, all right, well, this isn't a Marvel superheroes game, but whatever, because
Right.
each adventure had the character sheet for those characters. So that was okay, but then you got pigeonholed into, well, the book, it has to end how this chapter in the book ended. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Tanis fucked up his role and stepped in the
I think
acid trap and died. So how do we end if Tanis is dead? Well, I guess Tanis is dead.
that's basically what they did with the Faerun when they had the Time of Troubles. They released a series of RPGs that modules that went along with it, and basically your character is basically a passenger watching this shit all happen. You're getting dragged along by the
Right.
story. You're not able to really impact anything other than you can help kill some mooks with the heroes that get the job done, and you're like, this is
No,
god awful.
but you just gotta throw it on some rails,
I don't
man.
know.
I
I don't know
mean,
who'd want to play this. It's like it's really
yeah,
bad.
Well, and then you'd have the other side that were like, well, we already have characters, or we'll make new characters. We want our own characters, and we'll run through this. I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
but
but it's like
then
this is a
they already know the outcome.
it's like this is
yeah,
this is a reenactment. I mean, I
Yeah,
don't want to
right.
do a reenactment really.
Yeah, it's like going to a Civil War reenactment
well,
and then
yeah,
being shocked. It's like, oh,
Well,
wait, the
so the
South
North
wasn't supposed to win this time. How did that?
right, right. Well, the Dragonlance, they did it while you do affect big stuff. It just
Right.
it doesn't affect the same big stuff that the
Right.
stories that Weiss and Hickman dropped. Because that's going down a different story path, and there's like little Easter egg teasers of the other books and other stuff, but it's not, it is kind of its own little track and everything. I mean, we made the dungeon master mad because we killed a dragon that we weren't supposed to kill. We weren't supposed to be able to do what we did, but we followed the rules and we got it done. I mean, quite frankly, dragons might be cool, but twin polymorph into great apes throws big rocks and and
That's pretty
and
sweet. Yeah.
yeah, and those rocks do a lot of fucking damage, and so haha, there you go.
one
Uh,
one of the things that I for a game master, one of the things for my game mastering ability, one of the things that I've done, is I've gone back and this would be my third read through. The first time I read it was in high school, I think my junior year, and then I read it again in college, and that was actually for a course. And now I'm reading it again. Is The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli, and um, it it amazes me every time I read it. It amazes me. Um, everybody always talks about how The Prince by Machiavelli is so cold and, oh, it's, so brutal, and everything's black and white. And yeah, it is. And the thing that cracks me up about it is that, like Twitter especially, you will see occasionally people, um, and usually these people ascribe towards the communist end of politics, like literally communist politics. But they will post about how, The Prince by Machiavelli is, oh, it's so terrible, and you can't rule that way, and and you read through it even to the modern day, and you can go all the way back to the successful uh, governments and kingdoms and empires of the world to the modern day in 2024, and you can follow the guidelines that are listed in that book, and you can see exactly why one failed and why another succeeded. And it is a fascinating book to read. A little difficult, but because the use of English at that time is really long-winded. But like there's a lot of run-on sentences. But it is a very fascinating book. Um, there are some things that I had forgotten about, and so some of these things. One of the reasons why I'm rating it is to make these governments that I'm coming up with, whether it be governments that are coming up in Deep Night Revelation, or whether it's a government that you're encountering and how they're going to react in Pirates of Drenax, whether it's a government that you or a new kingdom that you run into in Braunhaven. Um, what is the most logical, or in some cases illogical, course of action that they're going to take? And so, like one example that I found really telling is that he brings up that it is easier to, if you are invading a country, so you invade, and the war, you have successfully completed a war. The best course of action for you is not to leave troops there and do a policing action. The best course of action is set up a colony, because the colony will police itself. The colony will, in most cases, ingratiate itself to the populace itself, or be made up of the populace itself, and will govern itself, and will owe fealty to you because you will be funding the colony. You don't necessarily need to leave troops there. And in so doing, you will get more of the countryside more or less on your side, owing fealty to you because they owe fealty to the colony, and everybody's happy. And that's a really interesting point, because you look at a lot of cases and that worked. I can think of one major case where that didn't work, but yeah, that's a very interesting point of view. The other one that he brings up, about if you are through luck, you are given a rulership. Like, essentially, you inherit it. Like, oh, dad died, and so we're going through this in Pirates of Drenax. Oh, dad died, and I have inherited his shitstorm. How do you handle that? And it goes through a number of steps. And unfortunately, the only example that he has to give in that book at the time is a really unfortunate one, because the person that the prince that inherited the kingdom, his dad dies while the prince himself is also on death's door with a disease. So, not a whole lot that this kid could do, because he didn't have a whole lot of time himself. But the things that he did do, he only made a couple of real mistakes, like he backed the wrong pope and things like that. but it's a very, very interesting read. If you ever have a chance, or it's not very long. It's like what 123, 125 pages. It's not very long,
Yeah.
but it is a fascinating read into. And every single chapter that you read, you're like, oh yeah, I can think of like 20 cases in the past 15 years that match all of this. I mean, every single one, you're like, yes, he's exactly right. Next page, it's really an interesting read.
I've
Yeah.
been doing the. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I've been playing the Age of Empires 4, and we're following the history of England right now, and that's real interesting in how it kind of covers out how the next heir got played out. I'm with Matilda
Oh
to
yeah,
it now. Yeah, so I'm like what in like 1100
I was gonna
ish,
say that.
maybe 10.
Yeah, I was gonna
Yeah.
ask you which Matilda, but yeah.
No,
Oh,
the
you're talking about
first
the
was
first.
yeah, Henry died and he had set it up for me, Matilda, to be the first queen, but my brother, because I was playing Henry at first. First I think I was William. I crossed the English Channel from Norway and started conquering England. Was how I started. But now it's to where, if we're following my as the player who they make
Right.
me do, I am now Matilda and somewhat Stefan, her son. We're at a seat. We're being sieged, and if the castle falls, we're fucked. And I can't get the castle to produce the troops to defend me and take out the enemy things. But it's really interesting how just the storyline does that.
Yeah.
It's what I get for having the Microsoft Game Pass.
Right. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
You get a slew of games that you normally would never play.
right. Yeah, well, I mean, I have the ultimate one, so I can,
Yeah. You can just go through
you
and
know,
be like, yeah, I think I'll
all I
play
had to,
this one.
yeah,
Yeah.
all I had to do was log on here on this, and I had free games I could fuck around with, and then I play the free games on the Xbox from time to time.
What were you gonna say, Will?
Oh no, I earlier was just agreeing with what you were saying about the Prince. I mean, it's been a long time since I read it, but
Yeah, it's the next one that I'm gonna read after this one is, I believe it's called. Oh, don't quote me on that. I think it's called The Courtesan, and it is about, or maybe not The Courtesan, but it is about how you would properly conduct yourself in the court of nobility, and and you know it even goes down to the level of, well, what is you have received courtly gossip. Who is it appropriate for you to give said gossip or pass it on to? And there are a lot of rules that are in play with that. Like I didn't even, this will be my first time reading it, but I just kind of thumbed through it and I didn't even realize that most of it, that there were this many rules to that. Like I just thought that they were just, busybodies around court. That's not the case. There are definite rules and etiquette that are played on who you're allowed to, if you receive gossip, who can you give it to. I mean, I knew that, of course, like the scullery maid isn't, if she overhears the princess talking about something, she's not going to be allowed to tell the duke. I mean, unless maybe it's pillow talk because the duke's nailing her. But aside from that, she's not, the staff isn't going to go around telling anybody. But there are actual etiquette and rules of, what is your station in nobility? Who can you talk to about things and pass information on to? It's a very complicated, evidently, a mess with courtly affairs. So I don't know. I'm kind of interested in seeing how that book reads as well. But I've never read that one, so
yeah, I don't know.
that's gonna be next on my reading list.
I'm guessing it's the Book of Courtesans.
That's the one.
Catalog of their virtues.
No. Here, I will tell you. It
I was
is.
trying to, because I was looking. There were a lot of fiction, but I'm going. This sounds like a nonfiction, so I was looking
Yeah,
for.
no, this is a non-fiction. It is.
There's the Demi Monde and
Yeah, the Book of the Courtier.
The Book of the Courtier. Okay.
Yeah, that would be the one. And yeah, so that's going to be my next read of courtly etiquette and how that exactly plays out. So, and
Oh
like
yeah. This is an older book. Yeah. This. Okay. Yeah. This is from 1528. Okay. That's yeah.
right,
That seems.
yeah, no, well, yeah, both of these are
Yeah. That seems pretty.
from way back, but it's basically the Mary Post guide to the fork goes on the right, and you know make sure your wine glass is on the left, and don't
How,
don't
how,
tell the bitch to the right of you what you heard about the Duke across the table. But you can tell the girl to the left of you because she's not as high on the social stature. Yeah, I mean,
how to not piss off. Um, how to not piss off. What is it? The Crusaders
yes,
while they're traveling through your lands, you're making a fortune off of them.
right, yes, right, yeah. You're making a ton of money off of them. Don't piss them off, and yeah. Or in some cases, how not to lose your head while at the dinner with said nobleman. So
I think Umberto Eco's got a book about that time period. Was it Bottolino? Yeah, well, that's 12th century. So that's more of the time period that Wes was talking about. He's talking about Matilda, right?
right, yeah, well,
Yeah,
yeah, she was what one
a little bit earlier, but
11
yeah,
1100 maybe.
yeah, maybe 1130s
Yeah,
somewhere
well,
in there, maybe.
this is
Yeah,
12th century, so that'd be yeah. So 1204 is when this
Yeah,
occurs.
that
So,
would be close. Yeah, well, I mean,
so
relatively.
these basically these guys are scammers in the Crusades trying to make a fortune.
uh,
So they're looking for like body parts that they can sell as the left hand of John the Baptist, that
Right.
kind of they're
oh
they're
yeah.
It's so funny because the book that I'm writing, I've now gotten to it's about magic and magic items, and I've gotten to artifacts and relics, and I bring up that not everything that you're going to find that is classified as an artifact and a relic is actually going to have any power, and I bring that up like there were cases where armies uh, in the 1100s would march and think that they were king shit because they had a box full of what they thought or what they were told were the bones of a saint, and that would heal them and make them invincible in combat. Is that true?
or a
No.
splitter of the cross.
Or a
All that.
splinter of the cross, right? And so what my point is that it doesn't really in some cases it doesn't really matter whether or not it's true. Like it could be open to interpretation whether that splinter of the cross or the bones of a saint actually conveyed any real power to the individuals wielding it. What is more powerful is the belief of the hundreds of people around it that are marching behind it that
Right.
truly believe that that is the case. If they think that that item is going to give them invincibility in combat, they are a dangerous foe. Belief can be a very, very powerful danger to those that oppose it. So
Yeah.
yeah, I've gotten into that whole topic of conversation. It's like Belloc in Raiders of the Lost Ark said. He holds up a watch and he says, "This is worthless. It costs $10 from a street vendor, but I take it and I bury it in the sand and it becomes priceless." And that can be true for almost anything.
I played a barbarian once in D&D. I made my own weapons out of shit wherever we went to these crazy fucked up places,
I've I've had those players before.
Yeah, I'm just gonna take a rock, off the corner of this temple. I'm gonna bust it up and I'm gonna strap it to a stick. Can I get the stats on that? I want a big maul rock, and then I would kill people with it, and I would like take their blood and their hair and
Yep.
shit, and
I've had a couple of those players.
yeah,
I had a player who played a cleric that instead of carrying a mace, he just carried a large +1 Bible,
yeah, smack
and
them
he
with
named it Thumper.
Oh yeah, we
Well-
would travel to villages, and I was role playing like I was just straight up a bard. I would offer to breed with their daughters to strengthen their bloodline.
Of course you
Yeah,
did.
I'd be like, oh yeah, I'll bed your wife for you and strengthen your bloodline, and then they'd be like, what? Because we were going across a mythical England, and I was just an outlander barbarian guy, but
Well,
Well,
I
that's
that's pretty fun.
we did the same thing in Blades of the Dark. Blades of the
Yeah.
Dark, the cutter is sort of the tank build, and one of the options you've got with equipment is it just says an unusual weapon. And
Yeah.
so what I was doing was I would build a new unusual weapon for each mission, and
Oh
so
hell yeah.
you're like, okay, I'm gonna take a saw blade and I'll weld that to a pipe, and I'm gonna fill the pipe with concrete, and that's gonna be my weapon for this one.
Yeah, yeah. You take some skulls, and you pack them full of rocks and dirt real good, and then take some gravel dust and kind of try to pack it in there and make like a mortar, or maybe some mud with straw and then bind it up real good and beat people with skulls, just three or four of them, and some rope, and tie it to a stick, and you've got like a morning star made with skulls full of rocks.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, yeah.
Well, I think this is probably a good place to call it. Thank you
Uh,
guys. Actually, I mean,
yeah.
I know we didn't play tonight, but
It's all right.
I actually feel good about touching base with you guys about where
Yeah.
the direction of the campaign's going, where we've gone, and kind of taking a re-look at expectations for the campaign. And I'm glad that you brought up pacing because I'm in 100% agreement with you. And like I said, some of the pacing I'm going to take ownership of because it's my translation to you guys. But I agree with you. Some of the pacing is weird, so I'm going to try and that's something I'm going to work on.
Well, I think that it was intended to probably be up to that point of the game. And once you've made your handoff, it's sort of like, well, that's the last of the Imperium.
Right.
You from here on out, you guys are it. And so at that point, I think there's less of a race. You're trying to get rid of anybody that's problematic on your ship. It's your last chance to drop off reports for the Imperium, and they want out of there. They've been sitting there for I don't know how long, waiting for you to show up, and so the last thing they want is for you to be late. So
Right. And they don't want to take any time. Yeah.
right. So it does make sense that the pace would be very rapid up until that point. But once you're done with that point, I don't see that there's a reason that you have to keep that constant pace. I mean, obviously our characters would like to make it back alive, and they still have this mindset that they're going to return in their 40s and 50s and or I guess this traveler in their 60s and 70s and still
Right.
be alive.
Right.
So it's the so I don't know, it is and I think that we probably should slow down as a result.
Yeah, and that's kind of the overall feel for this next, well, probably this leg and the next leg, this book and the next book, both are kind of a slower pace of paying attention to what's around you more than
Sure.
than rushing. But yeah, and I like I said, I have, especially with this portion of the book, because so this portion of the book, they actually only detailed like 4 subsectors out of an entire sector.
Oh wow.
And so I went ahead and just detailed the rest of the entire sector. That took me about a week to do. And so I've got it all mapped out. It's all there. It
Sweet.
is a big map. And like I said, the big map is, I've got Fog of War on because you're not allowed to see all of it, because it's going to depend on where you want to point, where you want to go, and you can point in that direction, and then over the course of like a week or 2 weeks, your science department can look in that direction
Right.
and open that up. And so So there's that, and so a lot of this I'm taking cues from my Saturday Braunhaven game, and which is one of the reasons why I wanted more D66 tables, and so I'm kind of taking that and working in that direction of, well, let's see, because some of these planets, like I've detailed some of them, one of them in quite a bit of detail, using the World Builders Handbook. That took me an entire day, but some of the other ones are just, we'll find out what's there when you get there. I don't even know, but it's there, so we can randomly roll. And I think I've got like a basic UWP for it, but other than that, we'll figure out, if there's anything there when we get there. But yeah, so I mean, we are opening it up for complete exploration, and we're going to slow things down a bit.
Cool. Yeah, I have to check out World Builders. I really haven't read through it. I need to check it out because a lot of times what I do is when they have a lot of charts, I just start building tables and spreadsheets and then add the random number generators.
Yeah, they don't have tables and charts. They've just got like little blurbs that will show the mathematical formula.
Okay.
And you kind of have to read through those paragraphs to see, what are these variables? And so you read through it, and then you're like, okay. And then it will be like, mass cubed times the division of whatever over whatever, and it's like, I'm not joking. It's some intense shit. Some of it. I mean, there's some of them where you put it into the calculator and it's like a foot long. You're like, Jesus, what? It didn't look that long on paper, but no, it's because it's in a calculator. But yeah, take a look at it. I mean, if you come up with a spreadsheet, great. I'm not. You don't need to. I am going back to the front of the book, and one of the third, I think it's like third or fourth paragraph. It says, a referee doesn't have to spend an entire day, going through all of these calculations. The first time through the book, yeah, you kind of do. But now that I've done that, I can go back and be like, well, and for instance, do I care what the axial tilt is? Probably not. I don't care. And so in most cases, I'm not going to give a shit. And so I can go back and pick and choose. You can cherry pick pieces out of there to give your systems a little bit more depth. And that's kind of at the point where I'm at now, where I'm like, okay, well, now I need to experiment and see if I can just kind of pick and choose little bits and pieces of it and throw it in. But other than that, yeah, it's
right.
It's really in depth. It goes all the way. So, but yeah. So we will. So Will, you said you might not be available next week.
Next week, yeah, I've got family in town. I don't know of our plans. So something might happen Friday where all of a sudden they've decided to go to the beach and I'm still in town and I'd be available. But for the most part, I'm going to assume that I'm probably going to want to be busy with family.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So we will plan on that. I will double check with Brian and.
I may make a last minute, I can make it type thing if everybody else can go and you decide to run the game. So that may happen, but I'll let you. I probably won't find out until Friday that would be the case.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, if it's just Wes and Glenn, or if it's Wes, Glenn, and Brian,
right.
I have some internal ship stuff that we can run.
Sure.
And, so either way, or they can choose to point those sensors in a direction and take a look. So
sounds good.
There's a ton of different directions that we can go at this point. So
yep, sounds good.
Cool.
All right.
Thanks.
I will see you guys next week, and thank you guys for showing up.
Hey, sure. Take care.
Have a great night.
You too. Have a good night.